Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm going to discuss the documentary Obi-Wan Kenobi, A Jedi's Return. If you are a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everybody, welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations. And this was an episode that's been in the works for quite some time here, as I've talked before about my whiteboard, right? I have a whiteboard right beside my desk, and I have a long list of episodes that I want to get to, or at least talk about in some degree, on Force Ghost Conversations. And at the tippy top of that list, actually, is this episode that we're going to be doing today, which is about the Obi-Wan Kenobi, A Jedi's Return documentary that is on Disney Plus, and it kind of chronicles the making of the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series. It came out in 2022, shortly after the series came out and all that stuff. I think definitely around the fall-ish time period, fall-winter of 2022. I can't exactly remember off the top of my head, but it's definitely an episode I've been wanting to get to for quite some time. Love the documentary, and I can't wait to talk about it with all of you here too. Additionally, I have recorded this episode in advance again because of my schedule here, but I do with that, I do want to note that there is no Cloud City gossip this week in this, which would normally happen in this segment here, because I don't know the news that has come out. But I do know that at the time that this episode is actually released, I will be currently at the D23 Expo. So make sure that you are following us on all the social media channels: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and just search for Force Ghost Conversations, and we'll be there in some capacity. But you definitely don't want to miss out on following us on those social platforms, because we'll be keeping you up to date with all the news and announcements that has been coming out from the convention as best as we are able to provide them to everybody. So be on the lookout for that for sure. One thing I did want to note before we get into the meat of the episode itself is that we do have a question from a patron. So as you all know, we do have a Patreon here at Force Ghost Conversations, and for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a ton of different goodies for Force Ghost Conversations. A link, of course, is in the episode description here if you want to check it out and see the various tiers offered here. But again, at the $1 level, you do get your name shouted out, if that's the correct way to say that, on the podcast, and you also get to ask questions that'll be answered live on the show here. So we do have a question here from our patron Daz Davies, and the question is as follows here: the live action and animated Star Wars TV shows have always impacted and hopefully enriched the way that we see the movies. Now that the dust is beginning to settle on Acolyte Season 1, has it added to or changed the way that you think about any of the main Skywalker saga? And that, first off, that's a great question, Daz, and thank you for asking it here. Basically, my answer is that yes and yes, right? So the question is twofold. Has it added to the way I think about the main Skywalker saga? And the answer is yes. And has it changed the way you think about the main Skywalker saga? So the answer is also yes to that as well. But both are positive in that front there. The way that I always approach a new Star Wars show or anything that's new, whether it be a movie or a book, anything to that degree, I usually have like a day before it comes out, and I have like this moment of clarity where I'm like, oh my goodness, whatever happens tomorrow, today is the last day that I view the story as it currently exists in my mind, right? Because everything that gets added to it continues to provide more context, more information. Maybe it just recontextualizes something, a way that someone says a phrase. All that stuff can impact the way that I view a Star Wars or anything that I've known that has come beforehand, right? So I think most importantly, this is tied to the Acolyte, and then I think the Phantom Menace, right? Because they are the closest in terms of the canon story when it comes to the live action sense here. So I think it definitely has added to that, because we have a sense of what the Jedi are like only 100 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. We also get to see the way that the inner council works and how the politics are beginning to take effect. We've seen the Trade Federation as well in play here. And the Jedi seem to have some enemies across the board. And Jedi are also people, and they make mistakes and they cover up things. And this is all the questions that we've talked about here on Force Ghost Conversations over the last couple of weeks, which I think have really enriched the conversation around the Skywalker saga and challenged what we see in the Skywalker saga to a degree too, which I think is awesome and good and okay to do. So again, I'm really thankful that the Acolyte exists in season one. I can't wait to see more. Hopefully, it gets announced by this point. Maybe season two has already been announced, but at least at the time of the recording of this episode, it has not. And I hope that it certainly does, because I want to see these characters fleshed out more. The intrigue that has been set up is absolutely there. And I want to see more. So, again, rounding out what you asked here, has it added to or changed the way that I think about the main Skywalker saga? Absolutely, yes. And for the better, and as a positive note, I want to add on that front too. So thanks, Daz, for your question. Again, if you want to become a patron, there is a link in the episode description for you to check that out, and you can see all the various tiers that we have. And just on the other side of this break, we'll be back with our conversation on Obi-Wan Kenobi: A Jedi's Return. All right, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. This is an episode that we haven't done in quite some time here, even going all the way back to the Bad Batch. I think we've had a guest on Force Ghost Conversations for several months now, which I'm really proud of. That's something I really wanted to work towards a lot this past year. To have more guests on the show, to increase the variety of diverse voices and opinions in the room, and just have fun, interactive conversations about Star Wars. That was the impetus of the show when we first started back in November of 21, was to kind of just have seats around a campfire, right? The Force ghosts of Star Wars are surrounding us, and we're having a chat about our life, our themes, what we take away from things, and just how we can grow as people overall and learn from each other and just create the best community and society around us possibly. But now, because I'm doing some episodes in advance here, I am recording this episode solo, not solo a Star Wars story, but solo just me, myself, and I, which is kind of a throwback to how we used to do things around here when it was me in grad school for the most part. It was difficult to schedule people and just easier sometimes when I'm really focused on multiple things at once, to just throw a microphone in front of me, let my voice run for about a half hour, and then get into the nitty gritty of the episode, post it, release it, and then everyone can listen to it. So I hope, again, you've enjoyed all that, and I'm going to hopefully do justice here to this documentary here, because this was one that I was very much looking forward to. I know, when the Disney Plus came out and offered the opportunity for a lot of different types of stories to be told, I always thought that documentaries would be something at the forefront of what their content creation would be. With the loss of physical media, not necessarily the loss of physical media, I should say, but with it on the decline to a large degree, and the advent and increase of popularity of streaming platforms, when you get shows and TVs and movies that are created for those platforms, you lose a lot of the behind the scenes details that people like myself have really thrived upon as the years go by, because you can only watch a movie for the first time so many times, but there are also those hidden details that you can find within those behind the scenes details that allow you to recontextualize how you watch the movie, or maybe you see it at a different light, that allows you to rewatch certain sequences or scenes within a movie and maybe get a different meaning or experience out of it every time. And for me, I have always loved watching like Star Wars and behind the scenes details with Star Wars, and then learning more and more about the everything behind it. Like I'm one of those people that learning more, I want to learn more about Star Wars and the making of the films. I want to know the people behind the scenes. I want to know what they had for breakfast before they went into a scene, because all that impacts how they worked that day. Right? Did they have traffic getting into the office? Like, what was the story behind the making of the story? And that's something that's always fascinated me. And it's partially why I went into the field that I did originally for college, which was history, to study the past and to understand the motives and reasonings behind people, because it allows us to understand ourselves in the current day better, because everything constantly builds upon itself. So again, when we got like the Mandalorian, and then we got things like the gallery, the I think it was like 8 episodes about the making of season 1 of the Mandalorian, and we've got subsequent documentaries about the seasons after that. The prospect of a documentary for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which was probably my most anticipated thing to ever release on Disney Plus at this point has been something at the top of my wish list for sure. And this documentary absolutely hits every beat that I wanted to, and just to see more behind the scenes details is absolutely everything that I want. The Lucasfilm Archive is a treasure of unseen items across the that your brain can't even possibly fathom what they may have in there because there is so much limited access there for the public. And every time that we get new snippets of information, whether it be from the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, that showcases things in different lights. Like I'm the person that's there soaking it up, and I'm like, just give me more of this, more of this, more of this, right? I think one of the things that rest in peace to the Willow show, but again, you see like a Ron Howard behind the scenes from the original Willow set in the documentary they made for that show, which we've talked about here on Force Ghost Conversations too. You see him wearing a Star Tours hat, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want that hat. Where do I find that? And of course, somehow Mrs. Forsko's Conversations tracked down that hat, and now I have it. So I just love these kind of behind the scenes things. It makes the myth of what we are watching here somewhat grounded in a bit more reality than what it actually is. And then it kind of has that way of going from story on screen. You have these documentaries and behind the scenes details and stories that kind of help to bridge the gap to then the everyday person that is consuming it, right? At least that's how my brain always interprets it here. And maybe it doesn't not the same for everybody, but I just want to get everybody on the foundation here, the same place that I'm talking about here when it comes to this, right? They help to kind of, if I don't see it in the same exact way, or it confirms or reaffirms exactly what I've kind of thought in my first past viewing of it, or maybe a couple of viewings after that, the behind the scenes details always help to enrich the story a lot more. And going back to the question that Dad's had, right? Everything that you find out in addition to what is already presented there just continues to grow the story and how it makes sense in your mind. So this documentary again is nothing short of incredible, if you ask me. It's really honest and raw. You get a lot of behind the scenes details about the making of the show, but also just I think they're very honest about the fact that this is a show that brought people back together. And it was a healing story in many ways too, because Obi-Wan, not Obi-Wan Kenobi, but Ewan McGregor, the actor who plays Obi-Wan Kenobi, is very open about how the kids who watched those prequel films back in the days that it was intended for, they were the intended audience of that, are now older, and they get to sing the praises of the show in a way that people were and in contrast to the way that people were so negative about it back in the day. So now he gets to reclaim, not reclaim per se, I should say, but more so to just revisit these characters, the themes of this, and to tell a unique story set in between the events of episodes 3 and 4 that help to bridge those gaps in a way that I never thought I needed as a fan, but only continue to improve the storytelling again for both of those. A lot of nods to Alec Guinness, of course, in this documentary. I love the way, of course, all spoilers for the documentary Obi-Wan Kenobi: A Jedi's Return. If you haven't watched it on Disney Plus, again, go pause this episode now, watch it, and then come right back to this moment, and maybe have some thoughts on it, and we can continue the conversation on the social channels, of course. But I just wanted to note, like, again, like him saying like samurai in his very much Alec Guinness Obi-Wan Kenobi voice is just awesome. I love the behind the scenes archival footage. The stuff that you've never seen before, that they just can find ways and new methods to unearth it from the Lucasfilm archives. All that great stuff. And of course, back to the prequel trilogy too. You get to see Ewan kind of getting explained the Phantom Menace, or at least the idea of the Phantom Menace from George Lucas himself. About this guy that kind of just reluctantly takes on the role of master for this apprentice that he doesn't have any care for, not in the same respect that Qui-Gon did. He doesn't understand the purpose and meaning of what Qui-Gon's quest was in this matter with Anakin, of course, and how that impacts episodes 2 and 3 then. Like, these are the foundations there for the rest of the prequel trilogy, and it being explained right then and there to Ewan McGregor by George Lucas is just fantastic and awesome. I love seeing that type of stuff, and that's the true joy and benefits that you get of this. And partially, I'm sitting there, I'm Leo meme when I'm watching this stuff, and I'm like, whoop, whoop, yep, exactly right. He's saying it right there. The things I've been preaching for the last 25 years. Not that I say I need to be justified in what I was saying, but I was like, oh, it's cool when I was picking up exactly what the creator was putting down. I love that it showcases a lot of scenes where both Ewan McGregor, Hayden Christensen, Deborah Chow, the person behind the scenes, the main director of the entire series, is watching scenes from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy on the volume screen. I just find that utterly fascinating. And the when they talk about the approach for for not this episode, but for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, right? They're very clear about it. This is a person who is broken and broken in their faith. And I was like, I wrote down in my notes, absolutely correct. That's what I was preaching, or at least hoping for, when the series started here back in 2022. That would be the approach taken with this, right? There, obviously, it makes total sense that a person would be absolutely crushed as a human being from where they were all those years ago, and then to have their entire life upended and uprooted underneath them. Apologies also, as I've been dealing with some allergy stuff here. um, all that comes into play here with this series. And again, I just like seeing that, oh, I understood exactly what they're doing here, and it makes sense along the way when it comes to me for that. I love the prequel connections too. Again, not only is just Hayden Christensen back, but it's really cool to see Joel and Bonnie back for Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen. Uh, you know, it's just awesome. I get to see the new characters too, like Zach Braff in BTS, and Reva and little Leia, of course. All these fun things, just absolutely awesome when it comes down to it. And like I said, so much of this was a homecoming here for a lot of these characters, right? Like to see Hayden back in the hair again, and Ewan being there for his first day, right? You can see their smiles across the fields from each other there. Uh, the tongue in cheek nature of it all, right? Ewan being like, "Oh, if I had $1 for every time someone has told me that they have the high ground, he'd be a very rich person," and all that stuff. And uh, them saying like hello there when they first see each other again, and I just love seeing the joy on their faces again, like watching Attack of the Clones on the volume screen and being together, and this clear brotherhood that they had when they were both younger that they get to rekindle in this. Not only does it make me happy to see just two people enjoying their company, but also as a fan and defender of the prequel trilogy from the day I was 4, uh, just it warms my heart. And again, I just feel good seeing that people take pride in the work that they do, and it just inspires me to do better work in the things that I do, right? With this podcast, my professional career, all this type of stuff. And it just comes into fruition for me in the things that they're doing here. I love that Deborah Chow kind of explains the impetus for this show, right? Not only as Obi-Wan Kenobi this person that's broken and it needs restoring in his faith, and that's how he's able to see Qui-Gon Jinn at the end. But it's rooted in this father-daughter relationship, which was kind of inspired in a way by Deborah Chow's own story herself, right? She was able to impose a lot of her own family history and heritage from that experience of her own life into this series because of that, which I think also ultimately makes a story more empathetic when people are able to connect to the humanity of it all, because honestly it's just a story from a galaxy far far away. And if you don't have those human connectors that connect it to the real world, then it's probably not going to hit home. That's why the original Star Wars was so powerful at the end of the day. And like I said, in this industry, with the business of Hollywood, remember, show business is a phrase, and it's a phrase that's often used in the world these days. When you use that phrase, like, people are cutthroat, right? They're not friends anymore. They do a job. They don't even they're good acting, right? They act and then they go away. They never see each other again. But it was always glad for, at least it was glad. I am glad to see, I should say, that Hayden and Ewan especially have remained good friends in this industry all these years later, and they're able to reconnect on this show. And all that stuff. And to talk about Vader, of course, and the dark side people, right? Reva is a new character that, if you go back to our discussions on the Kenobi series as they're coming out, I was absolutely on board for Reva 100%. I still am. She's this character that's kind of in the middle of Vader and Obi-Wan, which is an interesting way of putting it. It's not something that I would have necessarily put my finger on when I originally watched the series, but it actually is there from a certain point of view. So maybe if you need that to help kind of reimagine the series, or maybe you weren't something as fond of the character as I was, then this is perhaps your opportunity to go back and rewatch it and recontextualize it at a different viewpoint in order to think through the ways for this character that are maybe more interesting to you, or more compelling, and maybe you can connect with them on a different way. Now, I absolutely adore Reva, like I mentioned, and I hope that we get to see more of her in the future, because, like, I know people are always like, I wish Vader, Vader is redeemed and then dies. Kylo Ren is redeemed and then dies. You want to see a dark side user not go down they not automatically have to die because they have a redemptive arc. And this is a character that has that, and I want to see that explored a lot more in the Star Wars story. And that's what offers up an interesting perspective for me, at least moving forward with the Reva character. But the Vader of it all again. This is an emotional pursuit of Vader, as noted in the of Kenobi by Vader in the series, which I think is an important thing to note when you're watching the series, and that's why Palpatine at the end is like, "Oh, Vader, are you sure your thoughts are clear on this one?" Right? It's his obsession with Obi-Wan that's his ultimate weakness. Later, it's exploited again when he sees learns about Luke Skywalker and Leia and all that stuff. Like the love that's there, the Anakin that's kind of still within Vader, in some ways is exploited for the gain of returning him back to the light. And again, Leia, right? She's bringing out this human side in Obi-Wan. I love that they were understanding of like, okay, the way I portray these relationships in the first couple of episodes between Obi-Wan and Leia should be similar to how he handled his relationship with Anakin, because he's reluctant in doing this. And then as he learns and becomes more familiar with Leia and enjoys, begins to form this relationship with her, he changes his approach with this one. He's learning from his own experiences in his own past. He's healing himself in real time, and I'm glad that they were able to both acknowledge that and recognize that in the course of the documentary itself. But just to be more aware of that as they are producing this is always a good thing, if you ask me. Leia brings out this human side in Obi-Wan, which I think is really awesome. But one of the things that was one of the cool things I will say about this is just the Vader of it all. I'll be honest, like, Vader is not my favorite character, but the Anakin Vader, when you combine them together, that is my favorite character across all of Star Wars. So seeing Hayden Christensen get into the makeup of the burnt Anakin again, wearing the suit and doing the choreography, learning all that stuff, seeing that behind the scenes detail of them training again, and in terms to the ultimate lightsaber fight that they'd be doing there, right? Talking about his memories of the prequel trilogy and talking with George Lucas, right? And Hayden has that wonderful quote there. Even when he's fully immersed in the dark side, he is still the chosen one. And that is told to him by George Lucas, affirming that. I know that people have all these thoughts and ideas across the board of like, oh, maybe Luke is the chosen one, maybe Rey's the chosen one. No, from the maker himself, George Lucas. And that's been very adamantly stuck with, in my opinion, and the Lucasfilm storytelling, is that it is always Anakin. And the way I interpret the prequel, original, and sequel trilogy has always been the rise of Darth Vader, the redemption of Darth Vader, and then the legacy of Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader is the sequel trilogy there. And that's how I've interpreted that. Like, he's always there. And that's how it goes, right? We pass on what we learn, and then it's up for us to create the world that lives on after us. And although he's not physically there, the remnants of Vader and the world that is created there, both good and bad for Anakin and Darth Vader, are reminiscent and populated within the sequel trilogy, which I think is really powerful and important prism for appreciating those films in a way that many probably didn't have. So again, Doug Chang is in this documentary too. I love seeing him hold the open Vader mask, right? The part there where the mask is struck open and Obi-Wan's able to crack a piece of the helmet off and see Anakin again, have that wonderful sequence. Incredible for me. I love that sequence just in general because it gives closure to Obi-Wan in a way, an absolution for him and the feelings that he had, the sins that he had, the guilt, the grief that he was holding on in some ways that was keeping him from holding back to being the Jedi that he was supposed to be, that we all know and love. And the Alec Guinness character that he is in episode 4, the mannerisms, the demeanor, how he handles himself is a lot different again from the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the prequel trilogy, especially the one that leaves Mustafar and goes to Polis Massa. All that's there, and it allows, again, this closure for Obi-Wan Kenobi too. He had to and again, just some final thoughts on this episode, on this documentary here. I love seeing that Obi-Wan is at peace again, and that's something that is great, a great way to conclude this, bringing in course, Qui-Gon himself, uh, Liam Neeson back into the fray here, the importance of that character in this story and including them in that for that purpose. Of course, the adverse of that, including Ian McDiarmid as uh, Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine. Him forgetting the word execute was hysterical to me. I was laughing in my hotel room as I was rewatching this to prep for this episode. Obi-Wan Kenobi, then at the wrap the rap show, Ewan McGregor, I should say. I mean, they're both intertwined. Ewan and Obi-Wan, him handing out cigars, some death sticks. It's an excellent Attack of the Clones pull on that front there. So just truly wonderful there. And of course, the ending with Celebration, right? I was there in that room when they basically were promoting the show to the nth degree at Star Wars Celebration 2022 in Anaheim. We were able to come back, my wife and I, for the not the panel, but the screening of the first 2 episodes, which was a magnificent experience amongst other Star Wars fans. Just truly a tremendous delight. And this is who the show is made for, the fans. And I just absolutely adore it. I love it so much. And this documentary just provides more contextual details that both affirm and just make me rethink some of the things in the ways that I've never had before. And that's what a good documentary should do. It's an enjoyment piece that just makes you think critically. It adds more details into the world, into the story. And I felt every emotion while going through this. I laughed. I cried a little. I felt anger. I felt sadness. I was warm, empathetic. All that stuff was in there in this great documentary. And I hope that everyone gets a chance to enjoy it because there's a lot of wonderful, great behind the scenes details about the making of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. And maybe if you rewatch it on Disney Plus, maybe it provides you with the motivation then to go rewatch the Kenobi show. Available on Disney Plus as well, but you can also purchase it for on Blu-ray and 4K now, and I have the 4K discs here in my house as well. So all that is there on the table for everybody, and I thank you all for listening to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. I had a blast just kind of chatting through some of the musings that I had from this documentary, and I hope that you have seen it as well, and maybe if you have or haven't, this is an opportunity again to go watch it. But I want to continue the conversation here. What do you think about the Obi-Wan Kenobi show? It's been a few years, and maybe that's an episode that we could do in the future, is talk about the legacy of this show as we get closer and closer to perhaps a 5-year anniversary of it very soon here. So with that, folks, that's all of the conversation I had about this documentary here. And let's continue the conversation on the social media channels. We're, of course, available on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Just search for Force Ghost Conversations, so we'll be there in some capacity. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And until then, may the Force be with you. Take care.